Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Ask a Muso podcast, brought to you by Yellow Music. I have someone that I have known for a while now it has just gone from strength to strength recently, especially, and he's one of the best things to happen to the Melbourne music scene. I've got Liam from Playlunch, the Bogan Funk man himself. Say g'day, mate, and kick us off.
Thank you so much, man. I'm stoked to be here. This is an exciting time. Oh man, yeah. So many things are happening. It's all very stressful. I'm trying to keep on top of it all, but we're getting by, and we're finally on this podcast, and that makes me very, very happy because I've been excited to do this for a while. So let's go.
Yeah, awesome. Well, there's so many things, so many places we can start. I suppose we might start with just music in general for you. Like, how did this sort of kick off for you? What was the interest? Was it always at home, or was there something else that led you in this direction?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I think for me, when I was about, I always loved music as a kid. My family, there aren't any musicians really in my family, but it was a very music appreciating family. There'd be a lot of car rides where it would be we have our favorite CDs on, and my mum would be like, "This is the best track, and let's turn it up as loud as it can go, and we'll all sing along." And so a lot of really fond memories of music being this way of connecting with people. And it wasn't until I was about maybe 13 that I started getting interested in I opened up GarageBand and loved, just the excitement of putting sounds together and hearing what different loops sounded like over the top of one another. And I never really had any desire to be some, super crazy guitar god that could shred solos and stuff like that. I think all I ever really wanted to do was write songs, and I sort of started learning, a bit of keys and a bit of ukulele and a bit of guitar, just so I could sort of wrap my head around chords and start writing some really, really terrible songs about girls I had crushes on and whatever heartbreak I could pull out of my 13-year-old existence. I think also around that time, I remember when I was 13, I found in the family's CD cabinet a Beatles CD, and that just totally changed my life, and I never looked back. So I would alter the four boys.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And because I'm the same, I don't have anyone that I've ever had a really strong relationship with family wise that has a player, that is just a player that's was doing the rounds, doing the circuit, playing covers. I don't have any of that. It was just an outlet that I just found, and I started with sport as the outlet, and then I just realized that I enjoyed this more. And then it just comes to a point where you really can't be doing both, because it's you either have 3 weekends solid and you're driving all around Victoria trying to do gigs all around, tournaments all around, or you're driving all around doing gigs, and there's no chance for you to be able to do both. So I just decided I'd pick music. So from there, though, it's songwriting is often the bit that maybe people get to last. The first thing they want to do is just fiddle and then play with other people. When did you start playing with other people?
Yeah, I think pretty early on. So Michael, who's the keys player in Playlunch now, him and I have been playing together. We met when I was in year 7. We started high school together. And I remember he was just I hated his guts. He was just so annoying. He was such a nerd. He was on my bus. He was in my class. I couldn't get rid of him. I'm I hate this kid. But then I heard him playing piano one day, and I was oh, whoa. That's the most amazing thing I've ever seen someone my age do. It was so he wasn't just playing something crazy complicated. He was playing things that were relatively straightforward, but he just he really understood, even at 13 years old, really how to make something sound expressive and musical. And yeah, I have this real memory of him sitting in the performing arts building of our school, and he finds a piano and he just starts playing it, and all of a sudden everyone just starts gathering around to just watch him do his thing. And that had a really huge impact on me. And so I think that for me, as soon as I started working on music and having anything to share, he would always be the first person I would go to with it. When I was in like year 8, we would like spend a lot of time like, kind of jamming together or just playing our favorite songs together, and it just kind of grew from there. It probably got serious around about year 9 or year 10. Year 10, I'd been playing gigs for about a year, just doing open mics and stuff like that. Dylan, who plays bass in Playlunch now, was also at high school with us. He was a couple years above us, and he's a violin player primarily, and we started jamming together, the three of us, and all of us were in like the school like vocal group together, and we loved like singing harmonies with one another, but we were always kind of like bored. We always like really wanted to sing some really dense, cool harmonies, and so yeah, we would sort of start getting together at lunchtime and being like, oh, well, if you sing this note and if you sing this note, and we just loved the feeling of like singing these crazy chords together. That was a really big thing for us, and so we started busking a lot together and mainly just playing covers. I remember for about a year, we only had like we had one original song for about a year, and then there was about 6 months where we had 2 original songs that we could play. And we were really excited to be able to play our 2 original songs. And I think that relationship with Dylan in particular, in terms of songwriting, is just been huge for me. Because I remember being 16 and he like was at my house one day and he was like, oh, I've actually written a song. Can I show you a song? I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like I don't know anyone else in the world who writes songs. You're the only other person I've ever met who does this. So like, yeah, show me. And he played me this song, and I still, to this day, like, I cannot believe that a 17-year-old wrote that song. It was like the best song anyone has ever heard. It's crazy. He's like one of the most talented people in the world. And so I kind of, honestly, dude, so much of my life I owe to like those 2 boys in particular that I've been playing with since I was a kid, and that we're still playing together today.
Yeah, so it's a mixture of like the Beatles and Dylan and Michael have completely curved your entire musical influence and what you are today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And a few other big artists along the way, for sure.
Well, the thing is, with Dylan and Michael, that actually makes perfect sense now. So like the school connection, you started doing things. There's a 2-parter for me. I was wondering, like, did you always have sort of a genre-specific idea of what you wanted to play together? Or was it more, well, we have piano, the acoustic, we have the violin, everyone at the peak of their instruments? I feel like from when I've first experienced you guys, it felt that way. I know it probably didn't feel that way when you were 16, but everyone really at a high level with their instruments. And then you just sort of went, well, we're playing the covers, how we can play them. Because obviously there's a certain way with our instrumentation we can play them. Is that just sort of how the songwriting happened? You went, well, what can we write with these instruments? Or was it like, I want to write folk music, I want to write this music? What was the sort of version there?
Yeah, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It was like, that's just like what we had. That's what we had to play with, It's like there were pianos around the place, and a violin and an acoustic guitar, and we sort of, none of us was a drummer or a bassist. That's sort of what we had, and I think we all definitely really liked that sort of acoustic, raw, natural kind of folky sound. But in hindsight, none of us were really listening to folk music at all. It was like, a lot of like alternative, like we all loved Coldplay, like those sort of early Coldplay records, and we loved, we all sort of came from these really different musical backgrounds. Like I was listening to, the Beatles and Stevie Wonder and the Beach Boys and Burt Bacharach and like all these old like pop sort of top 40 of the 60s and 70s. Whereas Dylan was very much coming from this like Radiohead, like sort of Brit alternative place. And Michael was listening to like, he would listen to film scores all the time. He had like this real mind for like orchestration and like the particulars of note. And so it was sort of just this thing of like, we weren't too conscious of what we were doing. We were just playing whatever whatever sounded fun and not thinking too hard about it. And I honestly think that like as the years went on and we were sort of trying to make more of what we were doing with one another, and we did have to try and think more actively about genre and style in order to market it to people, that's when things got really hard because we were kind of like, we don't really know what we're doing here, you know?
That can be very true when you're sort of forced, like when you get to a point where it's like, oh, we're taking it seriously now. How do we get someone to take us seriously? Now we have to...
Yes.
We can't be in the moment now. We sort of have to be a little bit more like serious, like purposeful. And it's interesting that you mentioned the different things and how you sort of just went into that busking and stuff like that. I first came across you three, this will be casting your mind back, first came across you three playing in a jazz ensemble of my own and at Bridie O'Reilly's.
Like it was yesterday, dude.
The Bridie O'Reilly's pub. And a beautiful time, magnificent establishment. And you guys were Sparks Music.
Yes, that's correct. That is correct.
So Sparks Music. And then shortly after connecting, you then became Parkville. For those who aren't geographically inclined, is that related to Parkville as in like, it's like a place, or what is the name? What's the original name? What's Parkville?
Okay. So Parkville is a suburb in Melbourne, which it was kind of like, 80th on a list of 100 names that we were sort of toying with to choose from, and I wish I could say it had more significance than it actually did, but not really. It was just sort of like we'd been busking for a while and we knew we needed to change the name from Sparks because we were 17 when we chose the name Sparks, and we didn't realize that there was already another fairly big band called Sparks, and a lot of people told us that, and then we started taking it seriously and we're like, all right, we kind of need to do something about this. So yeah, we'd been busking for a while, and we sort of really identifying with like the Melbourne busking scene in particular. And we're like, what can we change the name to that sort of gives that sort of talks about where we've come from a bit. And Parkville sort of sounded like, oh, this is cool. It's like a name of a suburb, but it also feels kind of, natural and open and honestly, we had about a week to decide before we were dropping our next single, and we just sort of had to bite the bullet, and so Parkville was what we went with. To be honest, I still think we didn't really like the name that much, but we just had to go with it, and it's stuck ever since.
I love it. Okay, so it was talking about born out of necessity. We had to have literally anything, and it's like throwing a dart at like the Melbourne suburbs. Just throwing a dart at the Frankston line, and then going, no, nothing on there. Don't like any of those. Yeah. Cannonook isn't a particularly good name for the trio, so I think we'll have to come up with something else. Let's go a little bit further afield. But no, that's cool. So then from there, you guys had lots of make it sound like you're old and dead now, but you guys had lots of success with that, and that was. Like, I still spin those tracks in the office shamelessly. They're very easy listening, and the songwriting, I think it goes back to what you were saying with the instrumentation you have is obviously something that you've chosen to add, like with drums and bass, to add on to what you guys have as the three of you, but the instrumentation allows for that big vocal presence, which is what you guys sort of connected over in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. It was sort of always about, like, it's got to be, I don't know, we just were always writing things that we wanted to be fun to play and things that really like excited us musically. And I feel really, the older I get, the more proud I feel of those times when we were younger and the sorts of stuff we were writing. Cause I sort of listen to it now. I'm like, this is kind of crazy. This is like, I don't know what to call this. Even now, all these years later, and so it is it is very interesting, and it was always about the vocal harmonies and the violin, really just bringing as much out of Dylan's violin playing as we could. It's so funny as well because we were the majority of our life together as a band was just playing these little gigs to 10, 15, 20 people in Melbourne, and it's so funny because I remember that gig where we met you for the first time as well, and seeing you guys do your thing, and it was so funny because like as soon as you would see any other band that like weren't playing like kids, but were actually playing like adults and actually playing like, no, this is the part and we know what we're here to do. Like I remember as soon as you guys started, it was just like, oh fuck, these guys are sick. These guys are so good. And like watching you do your thing, and like you as a drummer, you just like played with such power and like confidence, and it was so good, man. Like it's, and I think we definitely felt that like kinship with one another, because it's kind of like most of the 17, 18-year-olds that you sort of find at those gigs at that level when you're playing them, they're not really taking it seriously. They've got all their own ideas about what music is, and that it should just be fun and whatever weird old ideas from rock and roll they have in their mind. And so like as soon as you see someone else that is like, oh no, they're treating this seriously, it just lights you up,
Absolutely, like sees like, and I appreciate the gesture, because those words are the ones I would put to you guys. It was purposeful. Everything you did was purposeful. It was like, and Mum and Dad mentioned it, and they said, "Wow, these guys are the business." Because there was just one of those things when you notice, those are the exact words. Lee Walker's mouth, mate. That's the exact words he said. So but it's the idea of, I said, that purpose, that just preparedness, but in a way that you're not like, oh, they all know what they're doing. They actually know what they want to achieve as well. Like they're here for a reason. It's not just diddling on a couple of songs. 25% of the band aren't really in it, but they needed someone to play bass.
Yeah.
Everyone was there for a reason, and yeah, those sorts of things stick out, and that's why I'm still talking to you. However many years on, I don't wish to go back and think of how many years ago that was, but how many years we're still talking. But I suppose from there, there's been such a obviously large thing happened for 3 years that we had to sort of navigate musically. But where did Playlunch come out of this? Like how obviously you're still doing stuff with Dylan and Michael, bless them, they're brilliant humans, but what are you doing now to having met the rest of the guys, the hornbags, what's that all sort of happened?
It's kind of a long story, but also not a long story. So Parkville was going really steady and strong for a long time. I think 2019, just before the pandemic, was like a really big year for us, and we sort of released a new EP and sort of did a bunch of singles before that, and we're really growing an audience, and we had like some big like support slots we got to do and everything, and it was so exciting. And then like so many other Muso stories, it's like you're building all this great momentum, and then pandemic hits and just tanks, and it was really hard for me as well, because I had this rude awakening of realizing that like my entire identity that I'd built for myself had been, I'm a musician. I play live gigs. And I'm like, I can't play live gigs to anybody anymore. That's my whole, anytime I was, meeting new people or like at a new job and making conversation, and people would be like, what do you do? I'd be like, oh, I'm a musician and I play gigs. And that's like so much of who you are. And so the pandemic was this real, I wouldn't say like a crisis period for me, but it was sort of, I had really no choice but to sort of dig in right to the bottom of, why am I doing this? I'm not doing this because it's going to make me rich one day. I'm not doing this because I'm going to have an easy life trying to be a singer-songwriter. So, and I can't, you can't do it because you want people to like you, because you're not really in control of whether or not people actually like or connect with what you're putting out. You just have to do your best and put out what you can. And so I sort of got to this place where I was just sort of really, really missing that live scene. And it became the live scene, the idea of getting out of the pandemic and returning to that live scene one day became like this like mythical, like Valhalla kind of dream in my head of like how much I want to dedicate myself to that sacred space of the gig, when I come back to it. And so from that, I just started thinking a lot deeper about like, what is it I really want to do? Because, like I love Parkville. We all loved playing with Parkville, and we still do it to this day here and there. And we sort of, there's a lot of talks about, how to, sort of put our time back into it like we once used to. But it's really difficult to play that music live. It's really difficult because, as you said, it was like quite complicated musically, and any muso who plays gigs regularly with acoustic instruments knows that it's just a pain. You know, you are constantly at the mercy of sound people. Like, you've got feedback, you've got like things so rarely sound good. And also, most of the venues, particularly in Melbourne, are set up so that people can come and dance. People just want to come and dance. And I'd spent a while by that point at this sort of really great funk and R&B scene that Melbourne had going on. And I really wanted to get into that for a while. I really that's my favorite. Like, outside of the sort of folky acoustic thing we were doing, like Earth, Wind and Fire and Stevie Wonder and like old MJ sort of like off the wall kind of era stuff was just my everything. And I'd gotten pretty good at that point at like writing tunes like that, sort of using Logic as a tool for sort of arranging those sorts of things. And yeah, I guess 2 years of being a pandemic and just sort of dole bludging that whole time, I sort of had no choice but to just sort of start writing these really funny, stupid, nostalgic songs. And yeah, I remember. Sorry, this is a very long answer to your story, but I'm hoping you're interested.
I'm loving it. This is all new information to me. I'm loving it.
I remember one night, because I was living with Michael at the time in a share house. I remember one night I was out in the studio and I was cooking up some really silly stuff. Just some silly stuff. And like, not just silly lyrically, but silly musically, you know, like really making something that was just like really kind of extra and intense and sort of flamboyant. And I literally was having so much fun making it. I'm like, oh man, I'm just going to make this as silly as I can so I can just show it, take it inside, play it off my phone to Michael and make him laugh. And so I did that. I worked on it all night and I came inside. I'm like, oh dude, listen to this. This is the stupidest thing I've ever made. I played it for him and he's like, dude, that's really good. I was like, what? He's like, that's sick what you made. I was like, oh, and I showed it to another person. And everybody was kind of having this same reaction. And so I sort of, I guess over the next maybe year and a half, the pandemic, I just sort of kept exploring that. It's like, well, what happens when I try and make music to just like really, just to try and make something that is musically so extra that it just like makes someone laugh. And these Playlunch tunes started coming out of it. And I think another big part of it as well was, by that point, I'd spent all those years in Parkville, sort of, you know, I was in the division of roles and responsibilities in the band. I was sort of in charge of all the marketing and the graphic design and making the videos and stuff like that. And it was always so difficult because, you know, we're playing really serious, emotional music. So the branding all had to fit with that. And I had always thought to myself, like, man, if I ever start another project, I just want it to be stupid. I just want it to be something I just
fun for the sake of fun. I want it to be visually, audibly, sonically fun for the sake of it.
Exactly. And so it's sort of like I was writing music that was all about having fun, and I was sort of getting better at making these designs that were all about that. And it was sort of just, I guess it was just meant to be, man. And then, yeah, that's how Playlunch came about.
I get that. Look, someone who plays a lot of songs in front of a lot of people wearing a spacesuit, I absolutely get the idea of you put. There's context to this. This is a real band, guys. But like part of that is it's sort of like the inverse. It's like, yes, as much as you guys have your outfit, you have your look and stuff. We have our look, but then the songs themselves have some interesting themes, some more fun themes like yours, but then actually some of them are a bit more serious messages, and they're just really good dance tracks, really good songs that are just enjoyable to be a part of in the audience, in the room. Yes. And so I think with yourself, you've hit something that no one has hit before. So automatically you're entering into a new space. You've got in your head, especially when you spend, like, out of necessity, a lot of hours by yourself for a couple of years, you get an idea of something and you get an echo chamber of the same idea, and you assume that, no, this is silly. This is a novelty. This is a gimmick. And then you decide for 1 second to share it with someone else who isn't you, and they go, look, to quote Lee Walker again, that's the business. And, you know, and it is. So you get those sorts of things, and then suddenly you broaden your horizons to anyone that isn't you, and suddenly you realize that perhaps what you initially thought it actually isn't. And by doing something very unique, and this is very hard in our industry to do something unique, not because people don't have creative ideas, but because there's so many ways to skin a love song or to rehash something positive or a big event and things. Often we find ourselves in a position where we're utilizing something that's so it's so niche and in the mind for the person that wrote it, but there's themes that everyone can go, oh, that reminds me of when my mum and my girlfriend and this brother. Whereas in this case, if you don't remember what came between Fireman Sam and Bob the Builder when you were home after school, how are you going to know what's on the telly, guys? You're not going to be... But then when you do relate and you do feel a part of that Athletics Day action, I hope I'm not giving away all the secrets at a live show, but when you are part of these things, you're like, fuck yeah, I hated the blue team.
Right.
I hated them, when I was in school. And suddenly you get to be so part of something that is so specific to you, but so accessible to everyone, because musically it's accessible to everyone. It's fun, it's enjoyable music. But to then be like, it's a part of that. Like, I was raised on Fireman Sam. Dad and I were firefighters, Victoria. Like this, to have that as a shout out, it feels like you're calling out my name in the song. It's like, it's those sorts of things. Suddenly you can go from something that is, you've come from a school of thought where a lot of the big themes that I listen to in the Parkville songs, I've got nothing to do with what you originally wrote, but I can hear something of my own in them, to something where it's like, I do remember going home and I do remember watching Blue Water High, and all those sorts of things.
Yes.
It's such a cool... It must be cool for you as well to have that juxtaposition of, I'm writing songs that are become general to people, and I'm writing something that's so niche and so specific, and everyone loves it because they go, I'm in this. This is about me.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It is the most rewarding experience I've ever had. Like creatively, it is so, so cool because, at some point, as you're growing up and you're deciding, no, I really want to do this music thing. I really want to do this music thing. No, I really want to do this music thing. The harder and harder it gets, the more that you just have to double down on like, oh man, no, I have to really think of myself as an artist here. And I really have to like treat it seriously, even if I'm the only person in the world who's thinking about it that way. And it was definitely scary in the beginning, shifting away from what I knew, which was just trying to write these really emotional songs that were just about the vulnerable stuff I was going through and sort of, like you said, like all the different ways you can skin a love song. And it was like, all of a sudden I discovered that there's this totally other thing you can do, which is kind of the polar opposite. It's kind of like, it's not hitting people from the outside trying to get in. It's like instead trying to hit people from the inside and coming out, and it's really interesting because I think a big part of it is I loved funk music. I loved like disco and funk music. And there are so many bands out there today that are making just absolutely incredible funk music. And I can tell that we're all referencing the same big records from that era that we love. But something that I felt really strongly was that like a lot of the funk music I was hearing produced in, 2019, 2020, the music was so hard and fun and raucous, but lyrically they were singing a love song. Lyrically they were singing, and I was just kind of like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just always felt to me like such a missed opportunity, because I'm like, there should be the lyrics should be about what the music is about. It's like you should have the instrumental and be like, what does this instrumental feel like? And then you should have lyrics that come from the exact same space as that. And once I sort of started giving myself permission to go there and started doing this thing of like, I'm just going to try and embrace what I know and just picture in my head, like when we're out of this pandemic, what would I love to see at a gig? And that thing of all these like Australianisms that are in our songs, it's kind of like, it's so fucking cool to see, because you could watch people in the crowd while you're on stage playing these songs to them, and you can watch them react in real time to hearing these lyrics. And it's so cool because you realize like, you've probably if you're here at a gig here in Melbourne, this is probably the 100th gig you've ever gone to. You probably go to gigs all the time, but you realize you've never heard a lyric that was that much about your life before. And a big ethos that we have in Playlunch is like, it's all just about the audience. It's not about us. It's like, we don't do anything musically. Like, all the guys in the band are jazz guys. Like, we don't put anything in the music that isn't going to make a crowd feel amazing. And I think lyrically, it's coming from this same space where it's like, it's all just about trying to give a punter a good time. And all of the personal stuff is in there. Like, it's still, I'd argue, like, it's kind of, in so many ways, it's even more personal and vulnerable than the Parkville stuff, but it's in a sort of subversive way, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a lifestyle vignette, but in a way that is, but then in a way that's, yeah, rather than saying like, oh, you know, there's this girl and she meant a lot to me, it's like, I don't think I'm congruent with this relationship. Foxtel, you know, pay-per-view. I don't know if there's any congruency here. It's like, I can relate to that, even if you don't know about, like, I don't know, Foxtel, I suppose is not a universal thing, but like cable and Netflix, and people are like, oh, they don't work. One of those is outdated.
Right.
Bingo, you get it. Like, you get the idea of the song. But then when you hear that there's a song, oh, the next one we're going to play is Foxtel Girl, you're like, what? That's a song about our cable network that no one uses anymore. That's crazy, you know? Right. So I think
it's a real, like, Australian thing as well. It's like, we sort of, I'm not sure about you, but anytime I'm ever like at the movies or something and I'm watching like an American film and they say something about Australia in it, you're always like, oh, like, what? Like, they know we exist. Like, we kind of, as Australians, we're so used to a really Americanized culture that we don't think of our cultural experiences as significant. But so much of us in Australia, like, we've all grown up on hip hop and hearing these really dense lyrics about the most niche things of American culture. Like, you know, sort of T-Pain singing about, you know, drinking kind of alcoholic drinks that they don't even stock here in Australia, but we all know what they are because it's just in the music over there. And it's sort of like, there isn't really any good reason that, like, I think I just sort of, and I don't know if this comes from my own sort of, you know, depression and existentialism and mental health that I deal with, but like, for me, the only way out of that is to say like, no, my life, the world I live in is just as poetic and beautiful and interesting as anywhere else. And I think that's been a really beautiful journey with writing these Playlunch tunes, is trying to be like, there's just as much significance in Foxtel Girl or how much a part of your life Kath and Kim was if you watched that growing up, or like, it means something to you. And just because it feels silly, like, I don't understand why silly has to be any less significant than anything else, you know?
And exactly, and it's like the rule. There's no rules of culture, but it seems that there's a rules of which cultures are important enough to, like, you know, like people who can do Straight Outta Compton and can do every of those niche things and at the back of Harlem and all these rap bars and stuff.
Right.
You've never been there. Like,
100%.
You don't. Like, not only do you not understand the plight and, you know, those African American communities, not only do you have no concept of what that's actually like, you rap these bars and you don't know what you're talking about, you know,
from a totally different world to you,
literally. So but then it's like, okay, well, that's fine, that in itself, we can put that in a box, that's fine, but then why am I not allowed to, or why is it less important, as you stated, why is it less important to then talk about, you know, I think about Seth Century. I got into Oz hip hop back when I was at uni, and I think about that, and I think about the fact that he went to Dramana Secondary College, which was up the road from the fire station, and talking about, you know, your last words in Rosebud, like Citizen Kane, you know, it's like, yeah, that's a reference to something that I remember, going to an IGA and taking a couple of things off the shelf, you know, those sorts of things. Those are the things, oh yeah, okay, rather than this bigger picture about American culture that I don't understand. I do remember that there were some skater boys that used to lift stuff from IGA on the weekend, you know, that is something that I do understand. I do understand what an IGA is. I do understand what it's like, you know, a bunch of Frankensteins on the Frankston line. I do know what that's like. It's fucking scary getting to Frankston line train express at 8 o'clock in the morning to Melbourne. It was terrifying. You know, I relate to these things, and what you're doing is just brilliant. I don't want to jump out and say it's the first that I've sort of really come across that's really loud and proud, but it could really well be something that is more than just I'm Australian, I'm happy to be here. Nah, we're here. We do stuff.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I think a lot of it comes down to like, I think the Australian identity, whatever that means, is a really, really complicated thing as well. Like I think particularly people our age, you know, like Australia is all at once like the most desired country in the entire world for anyone to move to. It is paradise, but it also has, you know, like a really dark and complicated history. And I think particularly like people our generation, we really don't know how to relate to that. And I don't think we see a lot of like good examples of how to relate to it, and like any way of relating to it can sometimes feel like really intensely political. And for some people that's really exciting and they want to be political about it. But I think for a lot of people that just sort of doesn't feel accessible to them, you know? And I think that, you know, and it's not like, you know, Playlunch is not the first to do this. Like I remember like sort of around the time that I was writing these songs, and I was sort of like following this rabbit hole. I remember that it was the year that the Wiggles won the Hottest 100. And we were sort of having this burgeoning like Australian childhood nostalgia thing coming up for our generation. And it was really like, oh yeah, like I think this isn't just something I'm tapping into. I think it's something a lot of people are feeling right now. I think it's this thing of like our generation is trying to work out, who are we? What does all this mean? And we don't really know where to turn to, but we can kind of say like, well, you know, we all had to wear school uniforms. That's interesting. Not a lot of countries do that. They don't do that in America. We all had to, you know, we sort of have these, you know, things like the ABC, and there's like a really specific set of shows on there, and that kind of, it doesn't define us, but it is something that we can all sort of gather around and say like, yeah, I experienced that, and you experienced that, and you know, sort of like regardless of your cultural background, even it's like your parents could be from wherever, but you grew up watching the ABC and Play School just like I did, and you grew up sort of looking at the kids in school like, oh yeah, they're the Foxtel kids and I'm the free-to-air kid, and like that's it. It's kind of, I don't know. It's and I just think it's really important to have music that you can listen to that actually recognizes your existence.
Absolutely.
It makes you feel so much less alone.
Totally. And also it's like you're trying to discover like you as in like a people, and then just what our identity is and how we feel about the country and stuff like that. There's lots of different ways to try and figure that out, but listening to everyone else's cultural music is definitely the longest way around that, because you're not really even subscribing to the idea of thinking about, okay, what could this be? And because you just head somewhere else. But then you think about, you know, we have intense summers. So during those terms 1 and 4, when summer is on its way in and on its way out, you got to wear a hat. Otherwise you're not playing because you're not allowed outside, because it's not safe. You know, we don't get snow. So we don't get snowed out days. We don't get days off because the ice on the road is dangerous to drive. We don't get that. But you will get third-degree burns on the tan bark at the playground if you don't have your hat on. That's just one of the things that's just unique to our country. So the whole idea of no hat, no play, those sorts of things, they're things that everyone just, whether they liked it, they thought it was silly, if you went to school here, you know what that is. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. Like I think maybe about 6 months ago, for some reason, Spotify, the algorithm doing its thing, decided that it wanted to show us to a bunch of Americans, and like our listeners like went up like 10,000 listeners for no reason other than Spotify decided it wanted to. And yeah, it was basically all of that was just in the US. And so it was so funny because out of nowhere, we started getting like all these DMs from people from like Nashville or Chicago or Colorado who were like, oh, I love the music. This is so good. But what does this lyric mean? And what does this lyric mean? Like someone DM'd us like, we've got this song Blue Light Disco, and the lyric is make Ringwood feel like New York and Belgrave like San Francisco, which are, you know, anyone who lives in Melbourne knows those suburbs, right? And we had someone, I think from Canada, message us being like,
loving the music. Just wondering, in Blue Light Disco, make what feel like New York and what like San Francisco? I'm like, that's so funny. That's so funny that like it would be confusing. And that's what's so cool about music, because it's like people have this idea. It's like, oh, nah, they'll never, no one in America is ever going to listen to this because they're not going to understand it. It's like, no, man. It's like music is music. It's like if people like the music, they then learn what the references are, just like we have with Straight Outta Compton and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
We never said, hey, we exist sort of thing in this way before. So you never had to.
100%.
So how did you meet the rest of the guys then? So how did the band, which is, was it 6, 7?
Anywhere between 7 and 8.
Okay, yeah.
We've had 10 before, but that was crazy.
That was just that was indulgent. I was being indulgent.
It was indulgent. Yeah, I had to be reined in. It's a good question. So it's funny because originally the idea of the project was something to be totally separate to Parkville and be something that I could do alongside Parkville that would be a totally different outlet. But then after a while I realized like, oh man, like most of these songs I'm writing from this sort of like shared musical taste that me and Michael have, and I'm kind of trying to make him laugh all the time, and I think he'd really understand this. So I think Michael needs to be the keys player. And then we were like rehearsing for a long time, and we had another bassist who was sitting in all the tracks, but he like was kind of flaky and like couldn't make it to some rehearsals, and I didn't know what to do. And Dylan, who I'd been sending all the demos to for years, is like, oh, I could step in if you like. Like I'm not a bass player, but I'm sort of a good enough guitar player that I can get my way through. And then I was sort of like, oh man, I think Dylan's actually the bass player of this band. So it's so funny that I brought them both along with me, but it was the best decision I made. And then from there, Austin, who's our drummer, he went to high school with us. And so we'd known him for a while. He was a few years below me. But he's like he's just like the vibe that we're going for with Playlunch, that's sort of fun, exuberant, funny, silly. It's just like, I'm just like, this guy is like, he'll totally get this, you know? And then from there, all the other guys are sort of, like a Monash jazz crew who I met through my girlfriend, who went to Monash and sort of, knows all the people from the course there, and sort of, I think Andre, our sax player, was the sort of first guy I went to. Like him and I had hung out a few times and we were getting along well, and I went to him. I'm like, hey man, I'm not sure if you like have time for like any new projects. And he just saw straight away, he's like, oh look man, like I'm so flat out at the moment. Like all I have time for is just meme bands now. And I was like, well, interesting that you should say meme bands, because I just showed him a design I'd made. I can't remember what it was actually. I think it was just a design I made that just said Playlunch over a big bucket hat. And
it wasn't even
music.
Like,
it wasn't even. It was just a design. I'm like, I'll send you some tracks, but this is sort of the aesthetic. And he took one look at it. He's like, oh, okay, send me what you got. And then I sort of started sending him things, and obviously like the horn parts are, like I take a lot of pride in like writing them for these Playlunch tunes. Like they're pretty complicated and really sort of Quincy Jones, like Earth, Wind and Fire inspired. And so that like really turned him on, and he's like, okay, like I'm in. And then he got Jerry, our trumpet player, and like a trombone player, when we sort of had trombone players coming in, and Tom, our guitarist, was a friend of his as well. So it's sort of all come out through that.
Awesome. Oh, look, you guys are a very well-oiled machine, and just I think the big thing is you can't just be there to play the songs. You have to be a part of Playlunch, because just doing the moves it just kills it. Because you say you're doing it for the audience, you can't have someone there who's just doing the moves. You got to have someone that's be a part of it, and the horn section that you have, be it 2, 3, 4, whatever, they want to be there, and they take a lot of, rather than just the standard frontman stuff that is implied that you are going to have to do. Yeah. They take that and they go, no, come on, boys. Come on, guys, eyes on me, and then they take over, and it's you got an earworm when you listen to tracks online, which you can have with yours, but you also have, what am I visually looking at? I'm so stimulated when you're live, which is exactly what you want for the audience.
Yeah, and that was a big thing, like sort of coming out of the pandemic. sort of waiting to, you know, sort of holding the dog back that was the band that was sort of wanting to run off. It's kind of like we really didn't want to launch it until we're well and truly out of the pandemic. We didn't want to be playing to like half capacity rooms and stuff. And that was a big thing for us. It's like live music is not just an oral experience. Like you've no idea how much even just like an album artwork influences the way that you hear what you're listening to. And by the same token, it's like a live gig. If you're in the room with musicians, that is all five senses going on of what that experience means to you. And you need to, if you really want to affect people and make an audience feel like the $30 that they paid to get in was worthwhile, you gotta give them their money's worth. And like, you should dress up. You should like wear something. It doesn't, and you know, like we wear these silly costumes. Like you don't need to be stupid and wear a costume, but you should think consciously and artistically about what every element of what you're doing on that stage is meant to be communicating to a crowd. And crowds just like when you treat an audience of strangers with that level of like respect, they give you everything as a performer. And it's like this amazing meeting where it's like, we just want to give you a good time. And they're like, we're having such a good time. And it feels like you're like surfing on one another. It's just the best, man. I always say like the hardest thing about being a musician is how little music you actually get to play.
That's so true. Like I talk about it all the time. We talk about like, oh, you know, this band I'm talking to is touring, whatever, and they're talking about the fact that, you know, Jimmy the drummer left his drumsticks in the fridge. They're not talking about the fact they played a gig because that wasn't the bit that was memorable. There's so many other little tidbits, but playing the music is so. It's going to sound like I'm breaking some serious ground here. So much fun. Like it is literally the whole reason we do it. And anyone who does it and is like, yeah, I like to just get in the studio and just be by myself and really be with it. I'm like, cool, that's great, but I want to be on the stage and really emphasize to everyone, like my mate Del does when we play our Delacoma shows, and John does when we play Justice Trio shows. You'll never come to this show again because you can't. Everyone who's here gets this show, and it's one night only. Every gig you play is one night only.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, man. You gotta make. I always think about this. Like there are gigs I went to, you know, before the pandemic that I was sort of spending the entire pandemic just thinking about like, oh, remember that gig where this thing happened, or remember that gig when this thing happened, or like even to the point where there are like gigs I went to back in maybe 2018 or 2019 where a specific musical moment happened at one point in the set, and I remember it because it just I was just so excited when it happened as a punter. And I'm like, anytime we're sort of hopping on stage as a band now and you feel even like 1% complacent, you just remember it's like, if we do this right, someone will remember this for the rest of their lives. It's an important thing we do, and it's so easy, especially in the you know, the finance or the lack thereof in this industry and at this level, to think that like it's not a serious thing, whatever, it's disposable, who cares? It's like, nah, man, like this is the most important thing, and everything else is just an excuse for people to do this thing. I like
absolutely
truly believe that.
And also the other thing is, when it comes to touring, especially when you have that string of shows, you have that lineup, that road trip, whatever it is, you have to know and remember and consistently remind yourself that you played 12 shows to 100 people. 100 people saw one show.
Yeah.
It's like you have to deliver the one show 12 times, but the people that see it only see the one, so they don't care that in Newcastle it went off because they're not in Newcastle. Yeah. They want you to make the Suki Lounge feel like the roof's going to come off. That's what they're there for, because that's where they are. You know, like you did at Soul Bar. When you guys came up at Soul Bar with Late November, it doesn't matter that you'd had shows before. It was the last show. Semantics. Didn't feel like that. It just felt like you brought everything.
Yeah. Oh, man, that was our favorite show of the tour as well. Like that, like it was so much fun, and it kind of, we were all like really sad knowing it was the last one of the run, and we were like, oh, we just want to make as much of this as possible. I hardly had any singing voice left, and all of us were so tired. We've been on the road and for so long. like the boys were hungover from the night before, but it was just like, let's just go for it, you know? And this is what's so cool is because in Play Lunch, the songs are written to feature the audience. The audience sings half of the songs with us. It's like, we sing this, you sing this, no hat, no play, or the Ath State chants, or whatever it is. And so every gig really is different because it's like there's a 100 new musicians sitting in playing the track with us every time. And so it always does, literally as soon as we start the set, we're like, na, 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 na. All right, what do these people sing this line like? And straight away it gets you in touch with what are they doing? And it just totally brings you into the present moment. And you're like, this is for these guys. We're playing for these guys tonight.
Yeah, that's good. That's actually a unique experience, the way you've done that. You've geared it so that you can always, from the word go, you can get everyone present. We're all on the same page. I don't need to look at everyone to make sure everything's all good. We're just on, and you just know that you're on, which is a unique thing.
Yeah.
So from here, you have lots of things, and I don't even know where to even begin. You guys have got lots of exciting news. You just announced that Big Sound is happening for you guys, which is amazing. It'd be lovely to have you in the Sunshine State up here again. What else is coming up over the next little while?
Yeah, so it's a really, really exciting time for us. Sort of a bunch of stuff has all sort of been announced very quickly. So yeah, we're playing Big Sound in Brisbane at the start of September, and we're sort of playing a bunch of shows around that, as well as a bit of a tour. So we're playing the Nightcat here in Melbourne, Suki Lounge out in Belgrave, and we're playing a bunch of shows supporting the Melbourne Ska Orchestra as well. So we're playing with them in Sydney and Melbourne later in the year, and Adelaide, and a few other regional towns as well. And something else that would have just gotten announced as well is that we're on the lineup at New Year's Eve on the Hill this year, which is just like such a dream come true for us. It's so cool, and we're just like over the moon to be playing shows for people.
Absolutely. Like I can relate to how you feel about the New Year's Eve on the Hill thing. Like when we were in the States and we were doing bigger shows, that was cool because we're doing bigger shows in a foreign place. But there's something about doing bigger shows that's something that you've always gone to, like something that you've attended and you've been like, look at them getting that spot. They played such a good show. And now you are going, we're on the stage.
Yeah, man.
There's something about that.
Oh, it's just, like Michael and I were literally there this New Year's Eve just gone, and we were watching it like, oh man, if we could do this would be so cool. And it's just like a testament to how hard all the boys in the band work, and how like the fans that we have are so amazing, man. They're so dedicated and exciting. Like someone's like last week we got a notification saying that some people have made like a fan page for us on Instagram.
I was going to bring this up.
It's so funny, man. Oh, it's crazy.
Like you literally have like a spoof account now that is all about you guys. Everything from, Dylan picking his nose in one photo to you guys like getting told that they've learnt the dances from the songs and stuff like that. Like,
and it's really weird. It's a very strange feeling, just like for me individually, to, you 1 minute you're hungover in a dingy share house studio writing a song in your underwear, and then you fast forward the clock just a little bit, and all of a sudden there's like 200 people in a city you haven't played in before who are in costume and have made bracelets with the lyrics on there for the songs, and they know all the words, and they are it's a lot. It's you don't have any way of comprehending it, and it's times like that I think you really just give it all to music. You just like, it's just music, man. That's just how amazing music is, and we are just lucky enough to get to be a vessel for this thing. It's like we're no more special or important than anyone else. It's just like, well, we're the ones who have the instruments and know how to play the songs, but we're all here to just enjoy the song together. And it's just so sick because originally, like, I was the one fan. I was the one fan of these songs that you know, you sort of you hear in your mind. You're like, oh, imagine a song like that. Oh, I love that song. That's so cool. And then you're like, oh, well, maybe I could write it down. Maybe I could like make a shitty demo of it, and then other people could hear the song. And it's like, oh my god, lots of people like this thing, and it's just so you just feel this pride beyond pride and this gratitude beyond gratitude. And it makes it all. It makes everything that's difficult about being a muso worthwhile. It's amazing.
Absolutely, you literally it is. Like, you can't really put it into words. It's not something that you can really comprehend unless you've done it. Like, everyone, as much as, yes, you say you've got your things that you do, everyone is still somewhat as important as one another in the audience, that we're both important.
100%.
Now, one thing I did want to ask you, I definitely have been sort of itching to get your thoughts on this one-to-one. The whole TikTok blowing up, you said you got like your listeners on through Spotify, they just went, zing, we like you, we want to send you to people. Yeah. Tell me about all of that. What is that like for someone that is, you know, like you said, I started with a demo that maybe Michael might listen to, and now people come to the shows. I put up a TikTok of, I don't know, doing something silly, and then suddenly people want to know all about me. What's that like?
It's really, really strange and like amazing, but also kind of frustrating because, you know, I'm a musician and all my friends are musicians, and it's really hard work, and like almost all artists I know that have to use social media to get their art out there into the world resent it. And I don't blame them because it sucks, and it feels like the least artistic thing in the world. And it's also really hard because when you write a song, like I don't necessarily think it's good that the people who write the songs should be in charge of marketing those songs. I think that's a really fundamental like paradigm shift from the music industry that we've been used to, you know, since the 50s, you know. But that said, with this new landscape that we're in, there's also this really cool opportunity to connect with fans and to treat the social media like it's just as much a part of the art as anything else. And so it was really, really interesting, I think with TikTok especially, because I was like, oh, TikTok or whatever, TikTok, it's stupid. Like, I don't have it on my phone. I don't want to get it. Sounds like it's poisoning people's minds. And don't get me wrong, like outside of music, I work as a content creator. These apps are poisoning your mind. They're very, very bad for you. And I think we're probably in a bit of a bubble right now with the way that the attention economy works. But just to come back from all that for a second, it's kind of like, it's cool because there are people who know about Playlunch now and love Playlunch that literally without these apps would have never have heard about it. No chance. And it was really interesting, like when we sort of first had those sort of initial videos that popped off and started doing well, it's like you're just looking at numbers on a screen. And the difference between 100 views and 100,000 views is really just a few more pixels lighting up. But you kind of watch it as the person who posted it and you're like, that seems like it's going to mean something different about my life. And then it does. It's so surreal. And it's like, literally, we were able to do this tour and there were fans in cities we've never been to before. And you just think, this is such a weird world that we live in. But it's also amazing. And even though I do think these apps are like just so bad for us in so many ways, and that they really, really exploit a lot of lonely and vulnerable people, there's also this flip side where it's like, you'll be chatting to someone at a gig and you're like, oh, if you don't mind me asking, how'd you find out about us? And they'll almost every time they were like, TikTok, TikTok. And you can't think to yourself, well, it got you out of the house and out here into the world. And like a lot of people are coming to our gigs that it's clear haven't ever been to a gig before. Like maybe they've been to like an arena show or something like that, but they haven't been to like a little venue to see like a band of our size. And all of a sudden they're making friends with other people who like, and they're bonding over the music that they like. And then they're excited to come to the next gig to see the friends that they made again. So you kind of think like, well, like I think the future of these social media apps lies in that side of what they achieve, of actually connecting people, of actually getting people out there into the world. And so for all the musos out there who are maybe listening to this right now, it's like, don't give up on these apps, because creators like you are the ones who like are the salvation for the apps. It's all everyone else on those apps who are just trying to put hate and waste people's time out there into the world that are making those apps bad. It's like, without you there to actually give people something worthwhile and beautiful, those apps are going to be a terrible place.
Yeah, that's actually true. There's two things I want to touch on when you said that. Is first one is I was listening to a podcast with Luke Kidgel and Meg Archibald and Reese Maston, and they're mates with Reese, and talking about when he left Sony and just the scariness of it being a label and X Factor and just shows at that time, and then looking at other label opportunities that have come his way, and he's done the dance and he's gone to meetings, and he's like, I gone into an A&R room with people who I expected would be, I don't know, looking at things, listening to things, headphones on, music, whatever. And he's like, it's just people in button-ups looking at spreadsheets and literally just going anything under 2 million on TikTok, not interested. He's like, I felt like I'd gone to the wrong place. He's like, this was so peculiar to me that that's what people do now. He's like, there are people that are doing numbers on TikTok for one song. And he's like, it'd make my bloody grandma go pale if I told you the number that they were going to offer him for one song that did a couple of little funny things where some people danced in front of it. And he's like, it's just a different world. So like you've got that side of things, but then you've also got, as you said, like with these objectively bad places, they're an easy place to put up bad stuff. There is not so much a duty, but if you want to play, then you're only going to be doing good stuff. You're only going to be putting in stuff that is meaningful, that provides value. And as you say, when people come to a show and say they came from TikTok, whatever, especially your 18 to 21 range, perhaps they've never gone out because for 3 years they weren't allowed to leave their house. Exactly. And I've said this on the earliest episode in this season. I was talking with a venue owner locally here, and she said there's a lot of 18-year-olds that are a bit nervous to come out because they don't know what it's like because they've never done it. They never had a chance.
Yeah, man. And like now more than ever, even though like the music industry in Australia in particular is struggling, festivals getting cancelled and stuff like that. It's just people need this so badly. Life is hard, man. Life is hard. Life is suffering. Life is difficult, and it's if you're a musician out there, or you're a singer-songwriter, and you're used to being in that world all the time, it's so easy to forget how much the world needs what you're doing. And so, every time I'm putting zinc on my face to play a Playlunch show, and I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, what am I doing right now? It's like, this is it's funny, it's silly, obviously, but it's also like important. It's so serious. It's so serious what we're here to do. And like, we're just in this space right now where I think the world is changing a lot and things like live music are suffering, but just because it's suffering doesn't mean it isn't just as important as ever before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like the energy and the positivity is like radiating through you, and I love that. So for any audio listeners, jump over to YouTube now so you can see that Liam is buzzing. So thank you for sharing that. Like I think that positivity, that just because it's down doesn't mean you just leave it alone, sort of thing. I think it's so important. And what you do with all your projects, but especially with Play Lunch, is so special. And as you say, a word that, I don't think a lot of people are brave enough to use, but it's important. So tell the lovely people where they can find Play Lunch, where they can find you and all your goings on.
I mean, if you're a TikTok user, you'll find us on there for sure. But Instagram as well, I think probably in terms of keeping up with what we're doing and where we're going and where our next shows and whether we're bringing out new music and stuff like that, Instagram is probably like the communication channel we use a lot. But we also have some really, really fun music videos made by the great people at Checklist Productions. Alex and Zoe are just geniuses, and we love those music videos so much. And so you can check us out on YouTube as well. And about 6 months ago, we released our debut album, Who's Ready for a Good Time, which you can listen to now on Spotify and wherever you hear your music. And if you are hearing us for the first time, if you haven't heard of us before listening to this podcast and you check us out and you like us, please send us a DM and let us know, because we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Genuinely, that's the thing. Like, especially when you got artists like Play Lunch, like yourself, Liam, people, they get a bit nervous, whatever, and it's different, it's foreign. But like you said, whether you got someone from Colorado saying, "What is a Belgrave? Do you need a cream for that?" Or you've got people who are like, "I'm from Spotswood and I listened to the Ask Muso podcast, and I thought your songs were cool because I used to get told off for not wearing a hat at lunchtime." Depending on whatever side of the spectrum you're on, Play Lunch is the place. It's the place to be. You got to get to a show. There's lots of shows coming up soon, major cities and regional stuff as well, I know, as well as this big thing in New Year's. So make sure you check out everything that Play Lunch got going on, because it's a bloody good time and you will not regret it.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
A pleasure. Well, guys, that's another episode of the Ask Muso podcast. Thank you for sitting down with us today, because it's just been an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to doing this with Liam for ages, and I'm glad we got to finally tee it up. So you know what to do: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the business, all the places you can find the great man and all his very hilarious music videos and music. Find him there. And until next time, I'll see you later.